Thank you guys for coming tonight. For those of you that want to stick around, we're going to have a Q&A here. We've got a real treat. We've got Brandon Schott, who composed all that wonderful music for the film. And I can't imagine any music going better with a film about kindness than Brandon's music. We've got Sara, who produced the film. And what was amazing about Sara is every time I'd read an article about somebody doing something nice or having research about kindness, I'd call her up and I'd say, Sara, can you see if they'd want to be in our movie? And every single time they said yes. I'm sure she didn't tell me the trials and tribulations she went through to get that. I found out later with the Dodgers that she had to fill out mountains of paperwork to get Major League Baseball to allow the Dodgers to let us film them. And then our big treat tonight is we've got James Fowler, who really started it all. And I'm amazed at how much research that I've seen out there that really is based upon what he started with this Kindness is Contagious. I mean, I can't imagine anything more amazing than a discovery like that. So we have microphones on both sides of the aisles, so people who would like to ask questions, please go over to the microphone and stand in line. And then we're going to be we're lucky we've got some major distribution for this film. And we're going to be doing a limited theatrical run, and we're looking for people who are interested in organizing screenings in their community at no cost to themselves. We have a company, Gather, that'll book the theater. They've got arrangements with every single major theater chain in the country. And so wherever you live, whatever state, whatever town, they can book the theater there if you're interested. So I'm going to pass out clipboards, and for those of you that just want to be on our mailing list, put down your email address. And if anybody wants to organize a screening, just check the box that says, I want to be a captain. Okay, so we have somebody right here.
Is this on? Oh, it is on. Thank you so much for your film, and it will benefit anybody who sees it, so thank you so much. I was just curious, when did you begin filming, and how long did it take to edit?
Oh my God, that's a very, very good question. I've found by also talking with other documentary filmmakers that the span of an independently made documentary is about 5 years. We started January of 2010, and we're just wrapping it now, so I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve. Editing is the biggest nightmare in the whole world. You cannot imagine how long it takes to edit even the smallest segment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because for every hour that you see here on screen, we have about 50 hours of footage. And at the very least, you have to watch again all 50 hours, decide which one is right, and then just watch again and again and again the film.
I have one other question. It was dedicated to somebody who died in 2010?
Yes, Sinead Johnson, who was the good virus, the woman in the suit.
And it said she produced it.
She did. She was actually, oh, sorry?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
She was actually one of the people that really brought this thing to fruition, because when I first started it, I kind of thought it was going to be just a short about James here. And then as more people got involved, Sinead got involved, and she was the one that brought Sara on board. And, she brought it from being a short to a full-blown feature film because, I've made films probably for the last 8 years, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life. And at the time that I did this, I said, I don't want to do another film. I need a break. And then the momentum just kept carrying it through and carrying it through and carried it for 4 years to finish this. And we were very sad to lose her, and I'm really sad that she can't see the distribution that we're going to have and the reach that this film is having.
Great, thank you.
And to be here at Stanford University, she would be blown away to be here.
Thank you very much.
Hi there. This is for Dr. Fowler. What inspired you to study kindness and to point you in the work in that direction? I mean, was there an event in your life that made you say, this is something that needs to be explored at a deeper level?
Well, this is based on work that I've done with my long-term collaborator, Nicholas Christakis, who's now at Yale University. And he and I were studying all kinds of behaviors in social networks. The first study that got a lot of attention that we did was on obesity, which is not necessarily the happiest subject in the world. And then the next study was on smoking, which again was not the happiest subject in the world. And as we were looking at these behaviors, we got interested in emotions, and it seemed sort of natural, well, these other subjects have been kind of downers, maybe we can look at an emotion that's actually positive. And so that was one reason. Another thing is that, and another part of my research is about cooperation, which is really important for human beings. There's no other species that cooperates at the scale that human beings do. And in particular, even the social species like ants, for example, they're all related to one another. And it's a lot easier to explain why family members are nice to each other, because they help each other survive, they pass on their genes, than it is for strangers to be nice to one another. So it is a real puzzle how human beings evolved to become so cooperative, so nice. And so another part of my research is all about that. And so this really brought together both of those topics, which are really near and dear to Nicholas's and my heart.
Oh, cool. Well, a quick follow-up. Have you discovered that this is a natural phenomena now in humans and at a very early age, or is this something that we learn?
We have only studied adults, but my understanding is that other researchers have found that altruism develops in early childhood. And there's a debate about this, okay? So there are some scholars that will say, no, it doesn't develop until, say, between the ages of 8 and 10, and others that say it develops between the ages of 3 and 4. But one interesting thing about this is that although it's ubiquitous, which means that there must be some process that exists in all people that causes us to develop this way, it's not something that six-week-olds, for example, are doing. Six-week-olds are focused on just surviving, on taking care of themselves. It's not until they reach an age where they're aware of other people and are able to copy other people and to reflect on what other people are doing that they're able to internalize those kinds of behaviors.
I know for a fact that younger children are altruistic like that because my grandson is now 7, and ever since he was 3 or 4, he's been in school, and when he sees another little child that is hurt or unhappy or sad, he goes over to that child and comforts him, and nobody specifically taught him that. So anyway, that's my anecdotal thing. David, I just want to hug you. I just can't, I had this overwhelming feeling during the film. I just want to hug you. So thank you for this.
Well, we can do that
Thank
after.
My question is for Sara. Did the making of this film change how you interact with people?
I don't think it changed the way I interacted with people because I have always enjoyed helping others and enjoyed others being nice, but it has changed the way I interact with myself. And something that I know David, Shanae, and we wanted to do by putting this film out there and spreading this message is to give an audience something positive to see instead of all the negative that's out in the news and the media. And when doing the research for different people we wanted to feature in the film and Reading Connected and just some of the people that we've interviewed, it helped me look at my own life and really take stock of all of the goodness that is actually around. So some people call me an optimist, and I always say, no, I'm a realist, because really, scientifically, on an actual level, there are all these great things and kind acts happening around us.
Hi, this question is for Dr. Fowler. Do you think that social networks like Twitter and Facebook are making people more or less kind?
That's a very contentious question. There was an experiment that received a lot of attention early this year where Facebook, they're very interested in this question. I've collaborated with them for about 4 years now. And they did an experiment where they randomly took some words took some status updates out of people's news feeds based on whether or not they were status updates that had happy words or unhappy words. And so some people didn't get their happy messages, or they didn't get their unhappy messages. And this allowed them to estimate how much seeing those messages actually caused you to change your own behavior, because they could see whether or not you used happy words or unhappy words after this was either taken out of your newsfeed or not. And so it was a really, really powerful experiment. Scientifically, it was really good to demonstrate that you get this process of spreading from one person to another. There were some people that were upset that Facebook was doing this. They believed that they have a right to see everything that's already in their news feed, and they were worried about the way that Facebook handled the ethics of deciding to do the experiment. And so as a consequence, there are pluses and minuses. As a researcher, I'm really happy with the new information we have from the experiment, but as a Facebook user, I'd like to see them follow some processes that are a little more rigorous about deciding whether or not these kinds of experiments are ethical. But that experiment and some other studies that we've done show that when one person says something happy on Facebook, it spreads to other people. And the way we did this was not with an experiment, we did this with rainfall. So if it's raining on your friend in New York, does it make you a little less happy here in Palo Alto? Our research shows that that's true, even when it's not raining on you. So only on sunny days, if it rains in New York, you're a little less happy. If it doesn't, you're a little happier. And so this is another way to demonstrate that these same kinds of things that psychologists have demonstrated for decades in the laboratory about emotions being contagious, this can actually be transmitted online. And unlike some other things that we've studied, like behaviors, if you're going to change your behavior, a lot of times it's only your close friends that matter. What we find with the emotional transmission is that even people that you're not that strongly connected to can have an influence on you. So even someone who's your 50th, your 100th, your 200th Facebook friend, they post something happy, it can change your whole day. And so it's really quite extraordinary, because what it suggests is that these online social networks, they might be magnifying this effect, this global synchrony of moods that we all have with one another. And it makes it even more critical for us to be careful about the way we express ourselves online.
David, thank you for such a magical piece of art and information. It made me feel really good, yet I thought it was provocative and funny and very musical. So thank you for all your effort and all your editing. I don't want this to be a downer, and this is directed to Dr. Fowler, but we know we live in kind of a tough times, at least it would seem that way, with the race situation that's going on, obviously, you name it, ISIS, Ebola, the immigration debates and so forth. And to many, there seems in our culture a kind of a cult of individualism, me first, greed is good, whatever, not in my backyard. And our mindset, I know, is generally on conventional political and cultural movements, but how can all of this affect that, and can it have any kind of political effect or massive effect?
So I take your point. There are plenty of bad things in the world, but I'm an optimist, and that optimism is based on a lot of research, actually. It's not our research, but other people's research. Steven Pinker just wrote a book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he documents just dozens of changes, really important changes that have happened over the last 5,000 years in terms of us becoming a more civil society globally. And so it's easy for us to focus on what's bad now. I mean, if we didn't, we wouldn't last long. So it's important for us to pay attention to those things. But if you look at, for example, crime has come down. The probability that a 20-something male dies a battle death is lower in the 20th century than it was in any other century previous. And it kind of blows your mind, because you think, wait a minute, there was World War II, there was World War I, how is that possible? Well, we forget there's 7 billion people on the planet. And so for most of those people, their lives actually are safer now than they were in any century previous. And so we're going to have these ups and downs. But my impression is that the context that we live in now, if you just look at the objective evidence, it's actually better than it was 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago. So that's sort of the larger picture. I do worry about these online social processes being something that's new, a game changer, because I think it is easier for things to spread now. So our highs are going to be higher and our lows are going to be lower. And what that means is that volatility might be something that we need to learn to cope with. I think one of the reasons why we got such a severe fiscal crisis during this last recession was because we're so connected now. That connectedness means that there's a lot less independence, and so we're all going to be doing the same thing all at once, and we need to learn how to cope with that. But I do think that the average over time has tended to get better, and that on balance, the technology has been a force for good.
Actually, kind of related to that question, if you think about the whole smile you're on camera, today we have cameras nearly in every pocket. How do you think that has affected people's behavior?
Cameras in your pocket?
Yeah, I mean, like, anybody can go and suddenly film the officer doing something. So everybody's filming each other and we're becoming visible to each other in a new way. So how does that kind of affect?
Yeah, so when people know they're being observed, they behave more nicely. And can I tell you, it does even just cueing it, your brain just totally reacts to this, even when it's not a human being. So there's this game called the Dictator game, which is a game that we use to measure how altruistic people are. And you can imagine what you would do if you were in this study. I give you $10 and an envelope. And you can keep all the $10, or you can stick as many of the dollars as you want in the envelope. You seal it up, you drop it in a box, and you leave the lab. And what I tell you is that I'm going to give all of those envelopes to a randomly chosen stranger who doesn't know who you are, and you'll never know who they are. So how many dollars do you drop in the box? Well, as it turns out, you ask the average economist how many dollars you think they drop. They say, well, 0. They'll keep it all for themselves. But that's not what happens. There are plenty of people who drop 0 in, but there's a whole bunch of people who split it 50-50, and the average giving is about $2. Well, when you have people play this game sitting in a cubicle where all you have is on the screen 2 ovals like this, just 2 ovals, they give about $1 more. And it's because it evokes the image, it evokes the idea that they're being watched. And to demonstrate this, so there are other researchers that thought, oh, that's nonsense. That can't possibly be true. So another researcher, what they did is they tested 2 different things. One was 2 ovals with an oval down below, like the same shape as a face, and the other was 2 ovals with an oval above. Well, the upside-down triangle didn't work. It was only the right side of a triangle that got people to give $1 more. So when you're being watched, you tend to be more altruistic. So my gut instinct, just answering your question on the fly here, is that research would suggest that as we become more of this surveillance society where we're being filmed all the time, especially by our friends and family, that we'll be more likely to engage in these acts of kindness.
Hi. There's so many things that I want to say. Just so much about, to all 4 of you, that you make the symphony, that you made the light, that kindness is contagious. And I think about when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I think what's happening in the world is we are evolving to this, and more movies, and hopefully, David, you're going to make more movies about this. Hopefully, we're going to walk away and we're going to proceed to do what some of us are already doing, but to help that pay it forward. The 6 degrees of separation, I always say, almost feels like it's 2 degrees of separation, and sometimes I say nano of separation because it's amazing of what's coming back to us faster and faster and faster. But I never forgot hearing what Mother Teresa said. She was being interviewed, and they were just awing and oohing, and she said, please, please don't do that, because what I receive by what I give is so much better than what I'm just feeling the gift of God and the grace by giving. So it's don't put me on that pedestal, because that's what we are, is connected. We're one. And I just love that more and more this is happening in the world, because it's changing faster than we think. So thank you.
Well, I will introduce a grumpy note. And I hope I can say this well, because I'm a little bit
nervous to say what I want to say. It goes against the grain of what's been said so far. You know, on a night like this in America, I was struck by how extraordinarily apolitical this film is. And somebody before me began to raise this subject, but he was nicer than I'm going to be. You know, this emphasis on how being nice and being kind, all of which I'm in favor of, I try to live my life that way, is going to make us happier, healthier, more successful. It's going to spread. It's going to, you know, our optimism is warranted. It ignores the systemic and structural and political realities that we live in. And if we privileged people, like all of the real authority figures, the researchers and scientists and authors in the movie were white, and if we privileged people can find a way to feel absolved of our responsibility to act politically because things are getting better, or we feel optimistic and that our nature really involves altruism and so on, we'll be making a big mistake. The unhappiness in the world, the suffering in the world is much of it, a great deal of it, most of it, is due to things like economic inequality, racism, exploitation of people who don't have power, violence, which require political and systemic action. So I just wanted to mention that.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
It's interesting that you mention that, because when I set out to do this film, and I think Sara remembers this conversation, one of the choices that I made was to create a film that's all about the positive and all about solutions, and ignore the problems. I wouldn't say ignore the problems, but I wanted to offer solutions, because I think most documentaries tend to be critical and to point out problems. And I think that's good. I think we need whistleblowers. But the thing that always kind of struck me with documentaries is, why don't they offer solutions at the end? They pose all of these problems, they point out all of these problems, but I find virtually every powerful documentary I see is very, very like soft on solutions, or very light on solutions. So we wanted to create what we call a do-umentary instead of a documentary, that it just gives you lots and lots of solutions. Working on James's work, I guess the fundamental goal of this documentary is, how do we affect actual positive, impactful change? And I thought, if we do a whole movie that ignores all of the filmmaking conventions of drama and has really bad things happen and an uplift at the end, if we create a whole movie that's all about positive things happening to people and kind of seeding the well with this kindness, to do what James did, that if I do something nice for you, you will do something nice for 4 more people, and each of them will do something nice for 4 more people. So in many ways, this is an experiment where maybe you watch this and you go home and you think, I'm going to do something nice for somebody. And then it will set James's research and Nicholas Christakis' research into play, where then they will do something nice for 4 more people, and each of those people will do something for 4 more people. And maybe we will make a film that can actually create positive, lasting, impactful change.
I'd like to say something. I'm now an old lady, but I was young once too. And I worked always with the people. And I always tried my best to be friendly and nice and treat them good. And I had always complaints that I had such an outstanding personality. I treated young, old as well. Older people's mostly very kind. But now when I got older, I see that many young people, they pay attention, but many, you go shopping, they hardly say thank you. They hardly say, how are you? And it's very seldom that I find people, when I go shopping now, that they really I think when they look at you and you see, oh, she's an older woman, they just pay no attention. And why many young people are very friendly, but many young people, if it is in restaurant or stores or any place, always forget to say thank you. And I wonder why. Or nice or kind or something.
Maybe we should ask the youngest person on the panel.
No.
I'm not sure about the research on this. I'm trying to think of things that I know. I know that millennials, people in their 20s and 30s, have been characterized as a generation that actually cares more about their community.
Yeah.
They're more engaged with their community. But it sounds to me like the people that you're talking are maybe people in their teens and their early 20s. And anecdotally, I understand what you mean about a decline in civility, a decline in sort of formal, nice actions to one another. I don't know whether or not that's actually real. I don't know if that's just...
Yeah, but it's very good if you find out and have more research on it, because I think they all get old, and there will be a hard time for them too, if the own family and all those forget that you get old. You're different when you're old than when you're young. And many young people don't understand this.
One thing that I can tell you is that whenever we've done research on the spread of happiness, the spread of kindness, age makes no difference. If it makes a difference, it's really tiny. It's too small for us to detect in our experiments. And so that to me suggests that doing kind actions and then also copying the kind actions of others, that's something that happens over the whole life course. But you're right, it's possible that things are changing right now. This other person that spoke a while ago, we live in a time of really, really rapid change, and maybe the things that are happening now are not things that are going to be the same as what we've learned up until this point in our history.
Thank you, thank you.
So I assure you I will be asking the panel a question, but
I just want to. I want to add. I'm sorry. One more. I want to add one more quick thing to that. I have 3 kids, and I'm teaching them better. So that's all I wanted to say.
So before the question, I wanted to recognize the act of kindness that you've bestowed upon us by sharing this project and your collaboration to all this audience for free. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And so the question I have has to do with, I wanted to ask specifically, I see kind of like 3 different types of act of kindness, and I wanted to understand for both the giver and the recipient if there's a difference in kind of the outcomes for those parties. And let me describe what the 3 types are. So the first one would be an anonymous and disengaged kind of act of kindness, and this would be someone that maybe just sits at home, maybe writes a check to a charity and has no connection to the recipient in any way, but still kind of gives towards that cause or whatnot. And then another one would be an anonymous but somewhat engaged activity, like you have an example in the movie where you show someone maybe pay the toll for someone that's coming up behind them. So they don't know who paid that toll, but it was somewhat more engaged. They know that someone that just did it, just preceding them. And then a more engaged, non-anonymous type of act of kindness where, you actively, there was another example in the movie and probably many that we can all cite, he took the person to Subway, bought him all the different kinds of sandwiches and whatnot. It was very obvious, the interaction between the 2 parties. So in these kinds of circumstances, do you have very different outcomes? Does the giver feel much, much better in one of those scenarios, and does a recipient feel much, much better in one of those scenarios, or are they pretty much indifferent? It doesn't matter how you manifest your act of kindness and how the exchange takes place. You get the same outcome.
So the stronger your connection to somebody, the more influential you are on that person, and the more likely they are to influence you and your emotions. So my guess is that this dimension that you're talking about of engaged versus not engaged, and also anonymous versus known, along both of those dimensions, I would imagine that the giver feels better. Now, one interesting question is the recipient. The recipient, I can imagine they're going to feel indebted to somebody that they know. So somebody does you a favor, you're going to feel like you owe them a favor back. And in fact, there are some societies where you have people play this dictator game. I was telling you, this game where you're giving the money, and everybody gives everything away. Because in that society, status is pegged to how much you give away. And so you can imagine that the recipient in those cases might actually feel like their status has been lowered because now here's someone who's giving to them. It sort of sets up between them. So maybe in that case, anonymous donations are actually better for the recipient. But that's just a speculation. That's not something that we've actually researched.
So, kind of just follow on then. So maybe an anonymous but somewhat engaged method, right, where you're still veiling your to the recipient. They don't know who is actually giving the kindness, but you're still able to feel somewhat engaged. You could kind of work the sweet spot of that, where you don't put that pressure back on the recipient, but you still get the outcome. Otherwise, it seems like if you're in it for the selfish interest of getting your own kind of good vibe, and you kind of are, you could put the recipient into kind of an indebted situation. So maybe you can kind of avoid that.
Yeah. So the problem though is that you may be motivated to be a role model, right? And so there's one of the classic things that charities do in order to increase donations is they'll make a list of all the people who've donated and how much they donated. Right, so they use status to their advantage. Like, you can be a high status person by being at the top of this list. I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing. And if anything, status might be actually tied up with all of this. It may be that one of the ways we achieve status is by being kind. And the reason why we care so much about status is that we evolved in such a way that the communities that were kind to one another, they did better over time, for example. So it may be hard to distinguish those things. You could interpret it as a selfish act, because ultimately it makes the person feel pleased that they're maybe better than the other person. But if it gets them to give in the first place, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've been told we're running over time here, so I have to wrap things up. But what I was going to say is, anybody with questions, if you want to go to the website, kindness-is-contagious.com, or just Google Kindness is Contagious, it comes up first. Send me an email with your question, and if it's directed to James, I'll forward it to him. We'll get an answer to your question, and we answer every single email that comes to us, so feel free. And then we have a treat for you tonight. Brandon's going to perform a few of the songs from the movie. And then we're also, with the release of the film, we're going to be releasing a DVD or a CD of Brandon's music as well. So thank you all for coming. It was wonderful to show this movie to you guys.
So this is a song called Good to Me.
Your key.